Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Easy English Spark. This channel is your home for mastering English listening and speaking skills. In the coming episodes, we'll follow a heartwarming 10-chapter story from Morning at Maplewood to Reunions and New Beginnings. Each chapter will serve up engaging dialogue, practical vocabulary, and guided speaking practice to boost your fluency and confidence. Ready to open the door and step inside? Let's spark your English journey. Starting right now! Chapter 1. Morning at Maplewood. I rise long before the first shaft of sunlight creeps across the polished floorboards of Maplewood residence. My room is hushed, holding its breath in the pale gray half-light of early dawn. A faint humming, the radiator perhaps, or some distant piece of medical machinery, serves as the only accompaniment to the steady drum of my pulse. I sit on the edge of the narrow bed for a moment, feeling the coolness of the air brush my ankles, and remind myself that another day has indeed begun. Outside my window stands an old scarlet oak, branches outstretched like kindly crooked arms. In summer, its leaves shade the courtyard. In autumn, they blaze crimson. But on spring mornings like this, new shoots quiver, tender and green. I press my palm to the glass. The pane is cool, but not cold, and the rising sun stains the sky behind. The tree in gentle strokes of rose and apricot. I have always loved sunrise, that fragile instant when the world resets, when everything, from the lowliest ant to the highest cloud, seems briefly washed clean. I shuffle to the small desk in the corner and switch on the brass lamp. Its warm glow settles over the few possessions I keep. A worn photograph of my late wife Emma laughing beneath the old cottage porch. A chipped porcelain mug printed with the words, "World's Best Dad." The leather-bound journal Rosa gave me, its pages curled where I have pressed too hard with an anxious pen. I trace a fingertip across Emma's face in the picture. She is mid-smile, mid-sentence, as though about to tell me some secret joke. And, as always, a familiar ache rises in my chest, yet there is comfort in the ache. It means the memory is still alive. I dress slowly, tugging on wool slippers and the cardigan Emma knitted the winter Michael was born. The cardigan sags at the elbows now, but it smells faintly of cedar and dry cotton, and wearing it feels like carrying a slice of home on my shoulders. I move toward the window once more, my daily ritual, and pull the curtain fully aside. The early rays flood the room, revealing dust motes swirling like pocket-sized galaxies. Below, The garden path curves past clusters of daffodils and early tulips, their heads bowed beneath last night's dew. A gardener appears, stooping to lift a stray twig. He hasn't spotted me, yet I nod in silent greeting. Some residents claim mornings here are monotonous, that one dawn bleeds into the next without distinction. Perhaps they are right, but for me, each sunrise carries its own subtle signature, a different angle of light, a novel pattern in the clouds, a unique bird song woven into the air. Today, a sparrow perches on the iron railing just outside my window. It hops left, then right, its bright eyes studying me with what feels like neighborly curiosity. I raise my hand and salute. The bird twitches its tail, chirps twice, and flits away. My knees protest as I settle into the rocking chair by the radiator, the very chair my children insisted we bring from the cottage. The wood creaks familiarly. I rock back and forth, measuring time by the gentle scuff of curved runners against the floor. Somewhere down the corridor, a door clicks, followed by the muffled thump of slippers and a cough that might belong to Mr. Daly in 206. He always wakes early, haunted, he once confided, by dreams of long-ago battlefields. I close my eyes and draw a slow breath. The air tastes faintly of oatmeal, disinfectant, and fresh coffee brewing in the dining hall. I imagine Clara as a child clattering spoons at our kitchen table, insisting her porridge required precisely 7 raisins. Clara in London now, an ocean of dawns away. I open my eyes to the journal on the desk, still shut. I have decided that each morning shall begin with words, whether memories or hopes. I cross to the desk, ease into the chair, and crack open to a blank page. The spine sighs. My pen hovers while I search for a starting point. Outside, light climbs the oak trunk like molten gold. I begin. This morning, the sky is a watercolor of promise. I am alive, and for the moment that is enough. Lines emerge about Emma's laughter, about the sparrow's fearless eyes, about the hush that blankets Maplewood before the breakfast bell. I write until my fingers cramp, then set the pen aside, satisfied by the tiny pool of ink I have poured onto paper. The act of writing steadies me. It rethreads the fragile fabric of my identity, knot by painstaking knot. A soft knock interrupts my thoughts. The door opens a crack, and Rose's cheerful whisper drifts in. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson. Coffee cart will be rolling by in 10 minutes. I thank her, and she slips away. Rosa hums as she walks. Today it is something upbeat, something younger than my tastes, yet her melody lightens the hallway. I rise again, stretch, and return to the window for the last phase of dawn. The sun now crowns the rooftops, kissing them bronze. Shadows shrink, colors bloom. I spot the reflection of my own face in the glass, lined, silver-haired, eyes ringed with a lifetime of stories. I study that face with an odd mixture of pity and pride. Not all journeys finish where we expect, but every path leaves tracks worth examining. Behind me, the corridor stirs. Rubber wheels of the breakfast trolley squeak. Voices murmur. Silverware clinks. Soon maple syrup will fragrance the air, and I will join the gentle procession to the dining hall. But for these last quiet minutes I bask in morning's cotton-soft hush, thanking it for arriving once again, unasked yet so generous. I place my palm flat against the window as if to absorb a little courage from the rising sun. "Another day, old friend," I whisper, unsure whether I am speaking to the sun, the oak, or my own reflection. It does not matter. The light answers by growing brighter. And so, heart steadied, I turn from the window, ready to greet whatever small miracles this ordinary morning at Maplewood may choose to offer. Chapter 2: A Home Filled with Light. When I close my eyes and lean back in this chair, time folds in on itself, and I find myself standing once more in the front yard of our old cottage on Fernbrook Lane. The first sensation that always greets me is sunlight, generous, amber, unfiltered by hospital glass. It pours across the clapboard walls, slides over the window boxes bursting with marigolds, and settles on Emma's hair as she waves from the porch steps, apron fluttering like a white flag of welcome. That house was never grand, never modern, yet every corner seemed to glow, as if the building itself possessed a quiet, enduring joy. In the mornings, birdsong slipped through the open kitchen windows, mixing with the crackle of bacon in a cast-iron pan. I would rise early, tiptoe past the children's rooms, and find Emma already at the stove, humming an old folk tune her mother taught her. She kept a tiny glass vase beside the sink, just big enough for one daisy, and replaced the flower every dawn, insisting the kitchen needed a daily heartbeat. While coffee brewed, she would hand me the first steaming mug and brush a crumb of flour from my cheek, calling me her sleepy lieutenant. Outside, dew studded the grass like scattered pearls. Inside, the scent of cinnamon rolls swaggered. Down the hallway, reliable as sunrise, Michael, our eldest, was the first tornado to barrel in. Even at 8, he conquered each day as though it were a mountain climb, boots half-laced, hair wild with pillow static, pockets already clinking with marbles and little screws scavenged from who knows where. He greeted breakfast not with a polite good morning, but with rapid-fire questions about how many stars fit in Orion's belt, or whether a homemade rocket could reach the clouds. Clara followed, softer in step, but ever the quick thinker, clutching her latest library book to her chest like contraband treasure. She measured life in paragraphs and punctuation marks. Even then, you could see the writer blooming behind her hazel eyes. And bringing up the rear came Oliver, our resident mimic and peacemaker, dragging his battered blue blanket, determined to hug away any storm gathering between his older siblings. After breakfast, the cottage became a hive. Emma's laughter blended with the whir of the old Singer sewing machine as she mended uniforms. The radio, tuned permanently to a jazz station, bleated brass riffs that fluttered through open doors. Sunbeams danced across the parquet floor, turning it into a golden river the children used as an imaginary moat. I would kiss Emma goodbye, feel her hand linger at my sleeve, and head to Thompson & Coder Carpentry, less than a mile down the lane. Even then I knew how lucky I was. Many men spent 2 hours on crowded buses. My entire commute smelled of lilacs and wood smoke. Evenings were the true theater of that home. I remember returning with cedar shavings still clinging to my cuffs and seeing lantern light flicker inside, little silhouettes darting past curtains like shadow puppets. I'd step through the door and be ambushed by the fragrance of Emma's herb stew, rosemary and thyme rising together like old friends. We ate at a heavy oak table I built the year Michael was born. Scratches on its surface mapped the timeline of our family. Here Clara's first A, etched by an over-eager pencil. There Oliver's experimental fork art. We never sanded those marks away. Emma called them signatures of living. Conversation flared like campfire sparks. Michael reported on a blown-apart science experiment, baking soda everywhere, but hypothesis confirmed. Clara recited a new poem, cheeks pink when we applauded. Oliver performed impressions. The school principal's cough, the mailman's whistle, my own exasperated sigh when the lawnmower wouldn't start. Emma listened with her whole face, eyes crinkling, dimples deepening. She possessed the rare skill of making each child feel like the sole planet in her orbit. After dishes, we migrated to the living room. Wind chimes whispered at the window while Emma coaxed music from the upright piano. She never had formal lessons, yet her fingers found melodies that made the rafters hum. Clara curled beside her, following the notes with fingertip air conducting. Michael assembled Lego fortresses by the hearth. Oliver fell asleep on the shag rug, thumb in mouth, blanket tented over his head like a tiny igloo. I often sat in the rocking chair, this very chair, and carved small animals from leftover pine blocks, gifting a menagerie to the mantel, a.e. fox for Emma, an owl for Clara, a spirited stallion for Michael, a laughing dolphin for Oliver. The fire would burn low, casting drowsy orange halos that softened every edge of worry in the world. Summers unfurled in vivid chapters. We strung bed sheets between apple trees to create instant sailboats, forts, theaters, whatever the day required. Clara staged backyard plays, directing her brothers with surprising ferocity, calling out, "And scene," while Emma and I applauded from picnic blankets. On humid Saturdays, we drove to Lake Willoughby, the old Chevy rattling with beach pails and sandwiches. Emma taught the children to skip stones. 3 skips earned a cheer. 5 earned a Wendy's milkshake on the drive back. Those nights I slept with windows wide, moonlight pooling on the quilts while crickets stitched lullabies into the dark. Autumn brought bonfires and quilted jackets. The cottage smelled perpetually of apple cider simmering on the stove. Michael perfected the art of leaf piles, mountains so enormous that even I couldn't resist a leaping plunge. Emma canned pears and plum jam, lining jars like jewels on pantry shelves. On October weekends, we hosted neighbors for chili suppers, the house swelling with voices, boot prints, and fiddle tunes until midnight chased everyone home. I remember stepping onto the porch afterward, Emma's head on my shoulder, the cold night ringing with distant laughter, our breath floating like twin comets. Winters sounded different, muffled, reverent. Snow draped the roof in silver meringue, icicles clutching the eaves like crystal teeth. We huddled indoors, orchestrating cocoa marathons and epic board game battles that ended only when Oliver surrendered the dice as a peace offering. Emma baked gingerbread until the walls themselves seemed glazed with sugar. One snow-thickened dusk, the power went out. Candles sprang up in every room. Shadows jittered across wallpaper roses. We piled mattresses in the living room, built a fort of pillows, and Emma told ghost stories so deliciously spooky that even I startled when the house creaked. The children's giggles braided with the howl of wind, and I remember thinking, this must be how lanterns feel, glowing fiercely against the dark. Of course, life was not all lanterns and lullabies. Money sometimes ran thin as carrot soup. The roof leaked one merciless March. Michael's fever kept us pacing barefooted at 3 a.m. Clara's beloved rabbit slipped its hutch and never returned. Yet even our sorrows shared the same light, filtered through Emma's calm resolve. When the paycheck didn't stretch, She organized a Saturday bake sale and turned blueberry muffins into rent money. When Michael's fever raged, she cooled his forehead and sang until dawn, her voice steady as a metronome, while I fetched broth and prayed. When Clara sobbed for her rabbit, Emma held her until tears were spent, then helped her bury a little wooden cross I carved. Emma taught us that hardship wasn't an unwanted guest, but a teacher, leaving behind resilience like footprints in fresh snow. Birthdays were holy festivals. Balloons across the ceiling, homemade banners crisscrossing the archways, each child waking to a throne of pillows and a symphony of off-key singing. One year, Michael wished for a telescope. I saved for months, and when he unwrapped it, his gasp ricocheted around the room. That night, bundled in blankets on the back deck, we traced constellations while Emma poured cocoa from a thermos. Michael spotted Saturn's rings and shouted until the neighbors' porch lights flicked on. Even now, when I recall his astonishment, the muscles around my heart tighten with something dangerously close to joy. And oh, the small habitual details. Those are what I miss most. Emma labeling jars in her looping cursive. Clara's hair smelling of fresh pages when she hugged me goodnight. The squeak of Oliver's sneaker dragging along the hallway baseboard. Michael tapping Morse code on the banister to signal that dinner was ready. The tick of the grandfather clock chiming 9, prompting a household migration to beds scented with lavender sachets. A kiss pressed to Emma's temple, her sleepy murmur of, "See you in the morning, love." I wish I had bottled every sound, every smell, every flicker of lamplight. People often say a house is just a structure, that what matters is the family inside. Yet I believe bricks and beams absorb the love poured into them. Our cottage became a living archive, its very walls tuned to our laughter, its floors remembering the echo of small feet racing to catch the ice cream truck. Even the front gate seemed to recognize our footsteps, squealing in a specific affectionate pitch whenever we pushed it open. It was undeniably a home filled with light. Light we created, light that fed us in return. Sometimes, in Maplewood's quiet nights, I dream of unlocking that familiar blue door and stepping inside to find everything exactly as we left it. Emma at the piano, Clara on the couch with a novel, Michael tinkering with kite designs, Oliver snoring beneath the window, and me, still young, still strong, standing in the doorway, coat dusted with sawdust, heart swollen with the simple, incandescent blessing of belonging. And when I wake, blinking at the sterile ceiling of my new room, I carry that dream for a few fragile seconds. It flickers, then fades, but its afterglow lingers, enough to light my present, enough to remind me that once, not so long ago, our home on Fernbrook Lane burned brighter than any sunrise. Chapter 3. Emma's Farewell. I remember the very morning the world tilted. Emma was at the sink, rinsing strawberries for Clara's lunchbox, when the bowl slipped from her grasp and shattered. She blinked at the shards as though she couldn't quite place where they had come from. "Must be Butterfingers," she laughed, light, airy, dismissive. But her hand trembled while she gathered the pieces, and a deep tiredness clouded the blue of her eyes. At first we blamed the season. Late March lingered in raw drizzle. Sniffles and sore throats drifted through the school like rumors. Emma brewed time tea, wrapped herself in the cedar-striped shawl her sister had knitted, and waved away my concern. "It's only a bug," she insisted. "2 nights of sleep and I'll be back to scolding you about muddy boots." 2 nights turned into 4. The cough settled in her chest, low and rattling, as though every breath had to negotiate its escape. I lit fires in every grate, tucked quilts around her shoulders, and canceled overtime at the workshop. Still, the brightness in her voice dulled by degrees, like a lamp wick drowning in wax. When Dr. Ellis finally arrived, black bag, gray mustache, shoes soaked from the lane, Emma tried to greet him with her customary hospitality. She pushed, up on one elbow, hair clinging to her forehead, and asked if he'd like coffee. Her smile was gallant, but her lips lacked color, and the doctor's quick frown told me more than his later words. He listened to her lungs, thumbed her pulse, and asked gentle, pointed questions. Afterward, he drew me into the hallway, away from the children's curious ears. "It could be pneumonia," he murmured, voice pitched low. "Could be something slower, deeper. We'll run tests in the morning. For tonight, keep her warm, keep her hydrated. Call me if the fever spikes above 103. I thanked him, though the sentence rang in my skull like a hammer on a bell. Something slower, deeper. That evening the children tiptoed, suddenly aware of floorboards that creaked and doors that thunked. Michael prepared Emma's vaporizer. Clara read psalms in a whisper. Oliver folded paper cranes and lined them along the mantel the way soldiers guard a gate. I sat on the edge of the bed, spooning broth between Emma's lips. She sipped with effort. Every swallow looked like a negotiation with pain. Between spoonfuls, she caught my wrist and squeezed. "Don't look so grim, Thompson," she breathed, reviving an old habit of using my surname when teasing. "I'll be up and nagging you by the weekend." But her fingers, once nimble, felt bird-boned and frail. The weekend passed. Her strength, did not return. The children still left for school, but they trudged instead of ran. Clara texted me from the bus stop. "Has Mom eaten?" Michael researched temperature logs and insisted we chart her fever hourly. Oliver drew get-well cards thick with crayons and hope. The cottage, usually resonant with radio jazz and flop-eared laughter, evolved into a hush punctuated by coughs and the clink of medicine bottles. Results came back. Bacterial pneumonia overtaken by viral complications. Intravenous antibiotics were arranged. A home nurse named Grace visited each morning. Emma thanked her, joked weakly about the indignity of hospital gear invading her bedroom, and endured the needle with stoic grace. But after Grace left, Emma's eyelids drooped. Her laughter, when it came, sounded wind-thinned, like distant chimes. One night, thunder rolled over Fernbrook Lane, rattling shutters and unsettling dreams. Emma startled awake, gasping, eyes wide as if she'd surfaced from deep water. I propped her upright, steadied her breathing, counted beats against her back. When her panic eased, she turned to me and asked, with childlike earnestness, "If I don't wake tomorrow, will you remember to water the marigolds?" I swore I would. She smiled, satisfied, and drifted back to fitful rest. Morning broke pale, the sky thin as skim milk. Emma could no longer sit unaided. Her voice, once the anchor of our little universe, reduced to a whisper you had to lean in to catch. Yet that whisper still managed gentleness. She urged Michael to ace his math test, reminded Clara to mail her scholarship essay, kissed Oliver's knuckles, and told him the cranes looked ready to fly. Later, when the children were at school, she asked me to open the window. "I need to smell the garden," she said. Cold air washed in, carrying wet earth and budding lilacs. Emma inhaled, one slow, reverent breath, and closed her eyes, lashes trembling. "All the sermons in the world," she murmured, "and nothing beats the scent of spring rain on soil." She slept most of that afternoon. Toward dusk she woke, lucid and calm, and asked me to fetch the cedar-striped shawl. When I settled it, over her shoulders she patted the mattress beside her. "Sit," she instructed, like the conductor she had always been. I obeyed. For a while we listened to the house, the ticking clock, the creak of settling walls, the faint laughter of neighborhood children scurrying home for supper. Finally she spoke. "You've given me a life stitched with love," she said. "Even the ragged patches shine." I tried to protest, tell her she was the one who shone, but she pressed a finger to my lips. "Promise me 2 things, Arthur. My given name, rarely used, My heart knocked inside my chest. Anything. First, finish Michael's telescope stand. He's waited long enough. I will. Second, keep telling our stories. Remind them, even when they're grown, that magic isn't only in novels. It's at breakfast tables and carpentry shops and back-deck stargazing. I nodded, incapable of speech, eyes burning. She looked out the window one last time. The setting sun painted her cheeks peach and gold, reviving for a brief instant the warmth of her healthiest days. She smiled, small, content, triumphant. Beautiful, she whispered. And then, as gently as a tide withdrawing from shore, her spirit receded. One breath, another, and silence. The cottage seemed to exhale. A hush descended so complete it felt cosmic. The clock ticked on, indifferent. I remained where I sat, holding her hand that was already cooling, tracing the lifeline I'd memorized over decades, unwilling to believe. That line now terminated in my palm. Grace arrived for her evening check and found me still there. She performed the final confirmations, her competence wrapped in quiet compassion, then left me alone to grieve. At some point the children burst through the door, laughter from a playground joke still hanging in the air, laughter that shattered when they saw my face. Michael froze. Clara crumpled. Oliver's paper cranes scattered as he dropped them, wings fluttering uselessly against the floorboards. We formed a silent ring around Emma's bedside, 3 children and one hollowed-out husband clinging to one another like castaways on driftwood. Tears came in waves, rinsing disbelief, salting memory. In the lamplight, Emma looked peacefully remote, as though listening to a melody the rest of us were too earthbound to hear. That night, our first without her, we could not bear separate rooms. We dragged mattresses into the living room, just as we had during blizzards, and huddled beneath a patchwork of quilts. I stoked the fire and told stories. How Emma once beat me at billiards by sheer beginner's luck. How she snorted when she laughed too hard. How she believed marigolds warded off loneliness. The children added their own memories until exhaustion hushed us. Somewhere before dawn I dozed, the fire dwindling to embers. Clara's head on my shoulder, Oliver's hand clutching my sleeve, Michael staring into the dark, eyes red but fierce with determination, as if memorizing every shadow so he could map a world without its brightest lantern. The days that followed blurred, casseroles delivered by neighbors, condolence cards stacking on the mantel between paper, cranes, the ache of arranging funeral details no one wanted to say aloud. Emma had requested simplicity, a willow coffin, wildflowers instead of store-bought sprays, and her favorite hymn, Morning Has Broken, sung softly so that shy voices could blend. We honored each wish. On the morning of the service, the sky draped itself in solemn gray, yet just as we carried her toward the churchyard, clouds parted, releasing a single column of sun that lit the procession. Clara gasped. Michael squeezed my shoulder. Oliver whispered, "Mom's spotlight." I chose to believe it. After the last hymn faded and earth settled over Willowwood, we lingered until dusk chilled our hands. Oliver tucked a folded crane atop the mound, wings bright against dark soil. Clara read aloud the final lines of a poem Emma loved. Nothing gold can stay, yet every glow remembers. Michael placed the unfinished telescope stand beside the grave, an unspoken pact between son and mother. That night the cottage felt cavernous, as though every room had grown several paces wider. The radio remained silent. The marigold vase sat empty. Still, when I lay in bed, I could almost feel Emma's weight in the mattress dip, hear the sleepy rustle of quilt, catch the faint lavender of her hair ribbon. Grief, I discovered, is the echo of love in an unoccupied space. In the weeks that followed, we stumbled through the choreography of loss. I found Clara at dawn transcribing Emma's recipes into a leather notebook. Michael took apart the telescope stand, remeasured, and rebuilt it sturdier than before. Oliver planted a row of marigolds under Emma's kitchen window, watering them with a seriousness far beyond his years. As for me, I rose each morning before the children stirred, stepped onto the porch, and watched the sunrise alone. Emma's sunrise, letting its light spill through the doorway she had once filled with her laughter. And every dawn I promised the quiet air that I would keep her stories alive, stitch them into our days, until even the floorboards could recite her name. Years have vaulted since that farewell, yet sometimes, here in Maplewood, a shaft of afternoon, sun will angle across the carpet just so, and I am back in the cottage, listening to Emma hum over bubbling stew. The ache returns, a sharp, sweet tug, but alongside it comes gratitude, fierce and steady. I was given Emma's love for half a lifetime. Some people never taste such radiance at all. And so, each evening when the nurse dims my lamp, I close my eyes, summon the scent of lilacs after rain, and whisper, "Good night, love. See you in the morning." For somewhere, beyond the reach of clocks and corridors, I trust she is tending a garden bright with marigolds, waiting for me to come home. Chapter 4. Children on Their Own Paths. Years glide by the way clouds slide across a summer sky, silently, insistently, until one day you look up and discover the entire horizon has changed. That is how it felt with my children. I blinked, and the rowdy breakfast table became 3 half-finished mugs cooling in an empty kitchen. The oak tree out front kept its patient vigil, while the voices that once orbited its shade drifted outward, following separate corridors of wind. Michael takes. Flight Michael was the first to lean into the future. In the year he turned 17, the telescope we had once built together migrated from his bedroom to the back deck, where he conducted midnight stakeouts of distant galaxies. College brochures began multiplying on the hall table. Caltech, MIT, Manchester, each brighter and farther flung than the last. One April afternoon he rushed home, waving an envelope plastered with crimson seals. Full scholarship, the letter proclaimed, to study aerospace engineering at a university 3,000 miles west. His cheeks glowed as though he had already stepped into the furnace of a new sun. I folded him into my arms, felt the chatter of his heartbeat, and managed, somehow, to say only how proud I was. But that night, in the quiet of the pantry where no one could see, I pressed my forehead to the cool metal of Emma's flour tin and let a single tear fall. September arrived. Too quickly? We spent the final week rebuilding his suitcase a dozen times, debating whether winter boots were necessary in California, and whether 16 screwdrivers were an acceptable carry-on. On departure morning, the sky blushed pink with possibility. Clara snapped photographs. Oliver offered his well-worn blanket for emergencies. I slipped a compass into Michael's jacket pocket, its brass cover engraved, "Home is true north." At the airport gate, he hugged me once, hard, then strode away without looking back, exactly as a launched rocket must. I watched until the bright backpack vanished into crowd light, then carried the echo of his footfalls all the way to the parking lot. For a while, letters arrived weekly, thick envelopes crammed with excitement, low Earth orbit simulations, new friends from Mumbai and Madrid, stargazing parties on desert hills where the Milky Way looked close enough to stir with a spoon. I pinned each page to a corkboard beside the kitchen window, tracing the arc of his orbit with pushpins. But seasons turned. Papers grew shorter. Quick emails sent at 2 a.m., then sporadic texts devoid of punctuation. Midterms, crazy love you pops. Eventually, updates became digital blips I sometimes missed if I fell asleep too early. I reminded myself that stars, once born, belong to the sky. Clara crosses the ocean. Clara's pilgrimage was quieter but no less decisive. She inhabited books as some people inhabit houses, strolling their hallways, rearranging their furniture. After Emma passed, Clara filled notebooks with poems about thunder and softness, grief and marigolds. Teachers mailed me accolades. Classmates mailed her drafts for critique. The summer she graduated high school, a transatlantic invitation arrived. A prestigious literary institute in London, full tuition covered, mentorship with novelists whose names made my head spin. Clara opened the email on the porch at dusk, moths flitting through the lamplight. She read it twice, then pressed the phone to her chest and whispered, "Mom would have baked a cake." We celebrated with store-bought pastries and nervous laughter. In August, I took her shopping for a raincoat sturdy enough for British drizzle. The night before she flew out, we sat on the floor of the living room packaging her world into 2 suitcases and 1 battered guitar case plastered with quotes. She lined the inside pocket with photographs. Emma beneath the apple tree, Michael grinning behind a soldering iron, Oliver mid-cartwheel, and me pretending not to cry. At the train station, Clara squeezed my hand and recited a promise. "I'll write you every Sunday. Real letters, ink on paper, the way novels smell." The promise held. For a while. Lavender-scented envelopes began to land in the mailbox, paragraphs looping across blue stationery about fog on the Thames, open mic cafes, professors who argued over commas. I read them aloud to the empty dinner table, letting her words reconstruct her presence. But as semesters piled up, her Sundays filled with deadlines, internships, and, eventually, a fellow poet named Elise, whose name started appearing in every paragraph. The envelopes thinned, replaced by voicemail snippets punctuated with taxi horns, until one day even those grew rare. I tried not to read absence as neglect. After all, Emma had taught us that to love something is to water it even when it grows, towards someone else's sun. Still, on rainy evenings I would catch myself listening for Clara's guitar, forgetting that the melody had sailed across the ocean. Oliver's compass points north, then east. Oliver, my youngest, lingered longest in the doorway between childhood and elsewhere. He spent high school afternoons sketching cartoons on every scrap of mail, taping impromptu puppet shows to the fridge, choreographing laughter to fill the cracks Emma left behind. When scholarship season loomed, he surprised us by choosing neither university nor trade school, but an apprenticeship in digital animation, 500 miles north, in a studio that produced the very films that had glued our family together. on rainy Saturdays. Departure day felt deceptively informal. Just a backpack, a laptop, and a rolled-up poster of Walt Disney. Yet when Oliver hugged me, his voice pitched low. "Dad, don't wait up too hard, yeah?" I swallowed a reply thick with contradictions. Fly but phone, roam but return, and simply ruffled his hair the way I had when he was 5. Oliver's calls came at odd hours, often punctuated by studio clatter and bursts of laughter from colleagues. He sent video clips of characters he had rigged, cheeky dragons winking at the camera, robots learning to dance. Each clip sparkled with his fingerprint humor. Yet behind the pixels I glimpsed exhaustion. Late-night coffee rings on drafting. Tables, deadlines chasing one another like wolves. Still, he swore he loved every minute, that the work felt like breathing color into air. Then, 2 years in, the studio merged with a global firm headquartered in Hanoi, and Oliver leapt at the chance to relocate. "Adventure calls," his text read, adorned with rocket emojis. A month later, my mailbox clanged under a package postmarked Vietnam. Inside, a silk scarf dyed sunset orange and a postcard of lanterns floating on a river. "Dad, you'd love the street food," he scribbled. "Come visit when you can." I taped the postcard beside Michael's pushpin map and Clara's blue stationery, an improvised collage of journeys crisscrossing the globe. The house learns to echo. With each departure, the cottage shed a layer of sound. First the clang of Michael's toolboxes, then Clara's page-turning hush. Finally, Oliver's cartoon voices. Rooms once overcrowded with bicycles and science fair posters now harbored only neat stacks of memories that nobody dusted. The refrigerator stopped emptying so quickly. The laundry basket stayed half full. The oak table, war-scarred from decades of homework and spilled ink, adopted a monkish stillness. Evenings became experiments in silence. I cooked for one, invariably making too much, then eating leftovers for days. Proof, at least, that time was still moving. Sometimes I caught myself setting 4 places out of habit. I would freeze mid-gesture, the clink of a 4th plate ringing louder than any heartbreak, then slide the extra settings quietly back into the cabinet. Yet emptiness is not purely void. It is also space for new habits to unfurl. I joined a community, woodworking class, spending Thursday nights teaching retirees how to coax dovetail joints from reluctant pine. I resurrected Emma's flower beds, learning the Latin names of every marigold cultivar just to pretend we were still conversing. I built birdhouses, lined the yard with them, and named each sparrow that moved in. But when dusk settled and the EI radio fizzed with static, the absence of youthful chaos pressed in like high altitude on the lungs. Holidays rewritten. The first Thanksgiving without any children present landed like a wrong note in a familiar hymn. Michael's lab schedule, Clara's literary festival, Oliver's project deadline. Next year, Dad. Promise. I roasted a modest chicken, carved it in near silence, and ate while replaying voicemails. Michael describing a Mars lander design review, Clara gushing about a poem shortlisted for an award, Oliver laughing mid-motorbike ride through Hanoi traffic. Their voices cascaded from my phone's tiny speaker, weaving an invisible garland around the kitchen. Christmas fared better. Michael flew in for 48 frenetic hours, wearing airport jeans and an expression equal parts joy and jet lag. Clara Skyped from a London pub where ugly sweater carols were in full swing. We propped the tablet at the end of the table, and she toasted us through pixelated snowflakes. Oliver beamed in at dawn his time, brandishing a tiny tree made of origami dragons. For a moment, all 4 screens, 3 children, 1 father, aligned like constellation points. The call ended. The house went still again, but the afterglow lingered in the circuitry of my heart. Learning to release. With every passing year, my role shifted from captain to lighthouse. I no longer steered their ships. I simply cast a steady glow, trusting they would glimpse it through fog whenever they needed orientation. Some nights I paced the hallway clutching my phone, wrestling the urge to text. Are you eating? Are you safe? Instead, I scrolled through their social media snapshots. Michael beside wind tunnel prototypes, Clara sipping espresso beneath ivy-clad windows, Oliver hammering keyboard shortcuts in a neon studio. Their smiles were genuine. That had to be enough. Gradually, I discovered a strange two-sided truth. Love that releases does not diminish. It expands. When Michael patented his first satellite component, I celebrated by baking Emma's cinnamon rolls, 24, and sharing them with neighbors who barely knew my name. When Clara's debut novella appeared in a bookstore window, I bought 5 copies and donated them to the Maplewood Library. When Oliver's animated short premiered at an Asian film festival, I convinced the activities director to screen it in the residence lounge. Residents cheered at every dragon wink, letters in both directions. I also began writing back, not merely replying. Every month I mailed each child a handwritten letter, news of the garden, sketches of new birdhouse designs, scraps of memory they might have forgotten. Michael at 6 building a cardboard rover, Clara concocting invisible ink recipes, Oliver staging a funeral for a Lego figurine. I slid a sprig of dried marigold into each envelope, Emma's silent signature. Responses came in trickles. A Polaroid of Michael in a lab coat speckled with stardust. A London playbill annotated with Clara's excited arrows. A Vietnamese recipe scribbled by Oliver on the back of a ticket stub. I pinned everything to the corkboard until it resembled a migratory map of love, a quiet benediction. Do I miss them? Fiercely, like lungs miss air between breaths. Yet I would not summon them back to smaller dreams. Parenthood, I have learned, is a long letting go performed in increments, opening a hand around a bicycle seat, loosening curfews, waving at security checkpoints, pressing send instead of call. Each act hurts, but each act trusts. On nights when loneliness prowls, I step onto the porch and gaze at the same steadfast stars that guided Michael westward, glitter over the Atlantic where Clara carves her paragraphs, and burn above the Pacific on their pilgrimage to Oliver's new dawn. The sky, at least, can hold us all in one glance, and if I sometimes whisper into the dark, "Come home soon, children," I know the wind carries the message along orbit lines too complex for any compass but the heart. For now, my task is simple. Keep the porch light glowing, the garden blooming, the stories breathing, so that whenever their paths bend back toward Fernbrook Lane, they will recognize the place where their journeys began and find it still pulsing with welcome. Chapter 5. Finding a New Routine. I never meant to leave the cottage on Fernbrook Lane. For years, after Emma's passing and after the children's departures, I convinced myself I could outrun emptiness by varnishing floorboards and coaxing rose bushes. But solitude is a patient negotiator. It arrives bearing practical arguments, your knees on icy mornings, the grocery bags that suddenly weigh too much, the silence that swells loud enough to rattle window panes. When the roof began to leak faster than I could patch it, when Clara's worried voice cracked long distance, when Michael cleared his throat and said, "Dad, maybe it's time," I finally folded. So one wet Tuesday in late October, a van from Maplewood residence stopped at the curb. I locked the cottage door with a key that no longer had a purpose, slipped it into my pocket like a fossil, and climbed aboard with a suitcase, a rocking chair, and a heart tangled between shame at relinquishing my post and relief at no longer standing guard alone. The first week. Unfamiliar clocks. Maplewood greeted me with institutional cheer. Pastel hallways, notice boards crowded with clip art sunflowers, the faint aroma of furniture polish mixed with oatmeal. The staff smiled too, brightly, as if rehearsing for a kindness recital. A nurse named Rosa, ponytail bobbing, freckles alight, showed me Suite 17B, a modest room painted eggshell white, single bed, dresser, desk, wide window gazing onto a brick courtyard. She set my rocking chair beside the radiator, best natural, light in the building, and pronounced the room cozy. That evening, I discovered Maplewood runs on bell tones. Breakfast bell at 8 a.m., medication bell at 10, exercise bell at 11:15, lunch bell at 12 sharp, and so on until the 9 p.m. Lights low. Chime, politely softer than a lullaby. At first, every peal jolted me. The same startled thump a farm rooster feels when relocated under a grandfather clock. But gradually, the predictability stitched itself into my nervous system, like a pacemaker of brass and echo. Morning Rituals. Reimagined Daruzo 6. I wake before the first bell, as decades of carpentry have trained me. Sunlight sneaks through the blinds in pale ribbons. I sit on the bed's edge, perform the inventory Emma used to tease me about. Wrists flex, knees bend, shoulder rolls, confirming all parts still operate, if grudgingly. 6 to 15. I shuffle to the window. The courtyard is empty except for maintenance cat Oscar stalking elm leaves. I press a palm to the glass, whisper a quiet benediction. Another day, old friend. Then open the blinds fully. Light spills across my desk, illuminating the photograph of Emma, the compass Michael once engraved, the lavender sachet Clara mailed from London, Xarthurdeer journal time. Rosa left a leather-bound book on move-in day with a note, for new chapters. Most mornings I write 4 pages. Memories, birds I've spotted, questions no one answers. The pen's scratch is a metronome. Ink unscrambles thought. 7, 10. I dress. Flannel shirt, cardigan with patched elbows, corduroys whose pockets still harbor sawdust ghosts. I straighten the bed because discipline tastes like home. 7:45. I hear Rosa rolling the coffee cart. She always sings, a mashup of 80s pop and lullabies. When the cart parks at my door, she pours a mug exactly 3/4 full. She's learned my spill threshold and asks what story I'm drafting today. I offer her a sentence. She offers a grin. The exchange feels like currency. Communal breakfast, learning new names. The dining hall is a rectangle of linoleum tables beneath fluorescent skies. I sit with 4 regulars, Mr. Daly, Suite 206, who wears military medals on a cardigan and calls everyone comrade. Mrs. Patel, 204A, who critiques the porridge's spice ratio and reminisces about mango orchards. June Miller, 118C, who crochets through conversation, needles clicking like hush-hush gossip. Calvin Brooks, 322, who reads sports stats aloud to anyone who appears defenseless. At first, we traded weather banalities, but routines breed fellowship. Now we swap bite-sized intimacies. Daly's night terrors, Patel's granddaughter's engagement, June's arthritis flares, Calvin's disbelief at modern ticket prices. I find comfort in their repetition. The looped stories serve as rails on which our mornings glide. Exercise class with elastic bands. At 11:15, the activity coordinator, Mason, herds a dozen of us into the sunroom for gentle movement. We form a semicircle of creaking joints, each grasping a pastel resistance band. Mason counts, 1 and stretch, 2 and breathe, while outside squirrels perform a more convincing agility demonstration. I comply, partly because the doctor insists, partly because Daly attempts heroics and someone must ensure he doesn't reenact boot camp push-ups. By session's end, my hamstrings protest, but my lungs feel rinsed. Lunch and letters. The noon bell delivers chicken soup or sometimes nostalgia disguised as meatloaf. Afterward, I retreat to the courtyard bench with pen and stationery. Mondays are Michael's letters, Tuesdays Clara's, Wednesdays Oliver's. I keep them short, mindful of their avalanche inboxes, but I tuck a pressed marigold petal in each. Envelope, Emma's silent accent mark. Posting the letters at Maplewood's tiny reception desk feels ceremonial, like releasing carrier pigeons. Afternoon discoveries. Maplewood offers 3 afternoon tracks. The library nook, 2 armchairs, a wall of donated paperbacks. I've taken to reorganizing them by theme rather than author. Journeys, loss, small miracles. The volunteer librarian pretends irritation, but she's started labeling shelves after my categories. The workshop, a converted storage room containing a rickety lathe, handsaws too dull for rebellion, and a pegboard of mismatched screws. I petitioned management for better chisels. When they arrived, Mason announced Thompson's Woodcraft Hour. Now I guide residents through sanding birdhouses. The scent of pine eclipses antiseptic and, for an hour, time warps back to my carpentry shop. The garden plot, raised beds behind, the laundry wing. Rosa placed me in charge of marigolds. Kneeling in soil, I swear I hear Emma humming through the rustle of leaves. I rotate among the 3, choosing whichever my spirit needs, quiet, creation, or dirt under fingernails. The 4 o'clock. Lull. Late afternoon empties halls. Naps claim residents like gentle kidnappers. I sit in my rocking chair, newspaper forgotten on my lap, and watch shadows climb the opposite wall. Often that's when memory ambushes. Clara at 5 reading cereal boxes aloud, Oliver's first unsteady bicycle glide, Emma lighting sparklers on a July porch. I let the images unfurl but tether them with slow breaths, lest nostalgia turn to ache. Supper and stories. Supper bell, 6 p.m. Entrees vary, conversation less so. After plates clear, we linger for story round. Each resident may claim 3 minutes to share anything. A joke, wartime anecdote, recipe. Initially I demurred, but June insisted newcomers pay their dues. Now I recount slices of our cottage life. Clara's leaf pile plays, Michael's tin can rocket, Oliver's puppet parades. My audience nods, smiles, sometimes sighs. Their listening transforms private recollections into communal property, and somehow that softens the edges. Evening wind down. At 7:30, the hallway lights dim incrementally, a sunset by electricity. I walk 2 circuits of the second-floor corridor, greeting Oscar the maintenance cat, checking that Daly's door latch clicks. He forgets. Depositing a carved pine swallow outside Rose's station as thanks. Back in Suite 17B, I call whichever child's time zone is most awake. Often the call lands in voicemail. I leave a snippet. Marigolds blooming, soup was decent, dreaming of your laugh. Some nights, Michael answers from a lab echoing with whirring machinery, or Clara whispers from a London bus, or Oliver shouts over Hanoi scooters. No matter the delay or brevity, the sound of their voices realigns my interior compass. Before bed, I open the journal to the morning pages, add a closing paragraph, a habit Emma would applaud. I note one small gratitude, a resident's joke, a cloud shaped like a violin, the scent of tomato sauce wafting from the kitchen. I sign each entry the way Emma signed letters to her sister. All is well enough. Adjustments of the heart. It would be dishonest to claim I have conquered loneliness. Some nights the mattress beside me feels as wide as an ocean, but routine is a kind architect. It builds bridges over open water. Each repeating task, letters, marigolds, birdhouse sanding, lays a plank that bears my weight. Surprisingly, Maplewood itself has begun to feel less like a station where journeys end and more like a junction where tracks cross. Daly's War. Chronicle intersecting Mrs. Patel's spice stories. June's crochet intersecting my carpentry. Rosa's humming threading through us all. I am no longer the man who arrived clutching a fossilized house key. I am a caretaker of mornings, a distributor of marigold petals, a teller of family lore to audiences who lean in as if the words might warm their hands. Epilogue to a day. At 9 p.m., the final bell chimes, soft, almost apologetic. I draw the curtains, but before turning away, I lift one slat. The courtyard lies beneath a wash of moonlight. A single lamp glows at the gate, its circle of brightness small yet absolute. I imagine my children somewhere beyond that circle, Michael calibrating satellites, Clara polishing metaphors, Oliver animating mythic beasts. I send them silent good nights carried on the same moon that roofs us all. Then I slide beneath the quilt, feel the mattress cradle familiar bones, and surrender to sleep wrapped in the quiet certainty that tomorrow will unfurl along the same measured bells. Predictable, yes, but sprinkled with moments of unscripted grace for anyone awake enough to notice. Routine, I've decided, is not the enemy of wonder. It is merely the frame that holds wonder steady so the shaky heart can gaze without fear. Chapter 6. The Journal Gift. The day the journal arrived began like any other. Sunlight sneaking through the half-open blinds, the whisper of Rosa's sneakers in the corridor, the comforting aroma of burnt-edge toast curling beneath my door. Yet when she stepped into my room, a rectangle of morning brilliance framing her silhouette, she carried something that shimmered, a slim, leather-bound volume the color of kiln-dried mahogany. "Found this in the craft closet," she said, placing it on my bedside table as carefully as a nurse lays down a newborn. "Thought you might give the pages a little company." I stared at the object, caught between gratitude and dread. Blank paper has always intimidated me. Its pristine quiet mocks every hesitant thought. But before I could compose a refusal, Rosa had flashed her freckles, tapped the cover twice, and vanished down the hall. I left the journal untouched through breakfast, exercise class, and lunch, pretending its presence didn't buzz like static at the edge of my attention. Only when the 4 o'clock lull settled over Maplewood, residents dozing, televisions humming to themselves, did I draw the curtain, settle at the desk, and pull the volume closer. The craftsmanship alone invited respect. Thick grain leather, stitched with waxed cord. Page edges the soft cream of candle wax. A braided tassel bookmark emitting the faint scent of cedar. Embossed in understated gold on the front cover were the words, new chapters. I traced them with a fingertip until the letters warmed, imagining Rose's impish smile as she chose that particular wording. Then I opened to the first page, a snowy expanse more intimidating than any provincial winter. For several minutes my pen hovered, dripping in visible apprehension. What exactly was worth capturing now that most of my story seemed already bound and shelved? But memory is a stubborn river. Once summoned, it surges. Without warning, a scene from 53 years, Ego burst forward. Emma, 18 and fearless, climbing a rickety ladder to rescue a kitten stranded on the church roof. The memory landed so vividly that my hand began to move of its own accord. Entry 1. Emma on the ladder, knees smudged, laughter ricocheting like sleigh bells, scolding the terrified Tabby for doubting gravity. I waited below, heart in my throat, ready to catch them both. She winked, my first glimpse of bravery cloaked in mischief. The pen scratched faster than thought. Soon a second vignette tumbled out. Michael's birth. A June thunderstorm rattling the hospital windows while Emma squeezed my hand hard enough to fuse our bones. Then Clara's first poetry recital. Oliver's puppet show. The night we burned. A ruined casserole and toasted marshmallows over the stove flame instead. Each recollection unfurled like a silk ribbon tugged from a magician's sleeve. When the supper bell rang, I realized 2 hours had evaporated. My wrist ached. Ink freckles dotted my cuff. But the once terrifying page was half filled with living breath. I closed the journal gently, as though it were a sleeping bird, and slipped the tassel between the leaves. The habit forms. The following morning, I woke with an unfamiliar urgency, as if the book itself were tapping from inside the drawer. Before dawn's first bell, I had brewed coffee, straightened my quilt, and opened to a fresh page. A ritual emerged. Phase 1. Rewind. One memory, captured as honestly as possible. No embellishment, no self-pity, just the marrow of the moment. Phase 2. Inventory. 5 details of the present day. Color of sky, scent of hallway wax, joke overheard at breakfast. Phase 3. Promise. 1 line addressed to the future, even if the future was only tomorrow's sunrise. Within a week, the habit felt as essential as oxygen. Blank pages became allies instead of adversaries. Ink, a bilingual bridge between what was and what might still be. Pages come alive. Strange things began to happen inside Maplewood once I started writing. The Whisper Network. June Miller, the crochet queen, noticed the journal first. She caught me scribbling in the sunroom and asked what kind of yarn pattern required so much furious notation. When I explained, her eyes brightened. "Stories or stitches, dearie," she said, patting my shoulder. The next day she pressed a ball of soft sea green wool into my palm to tie around the cover so memories won't escape. Thus the journal acquired a woolen belt, and June began leaving cryptic scraps of poetry in my teacup, daring me to weave them into an entry. Mr. Daly's footnote. During lunch, Mr. Daly leaned over his tray, metal ribbons tinkling. "Write up the Christmas of '45, he ordered, "and I'll fact-check your carol lyrics." I hadn't known he served in choir as well as combat. His corrections, penciled in cramped capitals, appeared in the margins of my next entry, transforming my private chronicle into collaborative memoir. Rosa's revelation. Late one Tuesday, Rosa asked if I'd share a page that mentioned her great-aunt's spice cake recipe. I hesitated. My grief for Emma felt too tender to exhibit, but Rosa's earnest interest coaxed courage. I read aloud while she changed my bed sheets. Her eyes glistened. When I finished, she exclaimed, "You just gave my aunt another birthday." That night I realized writing could resurrect more than memory. It could gift life to those who never expected an encore. Letters reimagined. The journal soon overflowed with episodes I longed to transmit beyond Maplewood's walls. Borrowing Rosa's laminator, I photocopied a few key pages: Emma taming the kitten, the thunderstorm birth, Clara's poetry recital, and mailed one to each child. Michael replied in a 3-line email. Read it 3 times during lunch break. Made orbit simulations feel trivial. Please keep writing. Clara's postcard arrived 2 weeks later, edges splattered with London drizzle. Your words smell like apple cider steam. More, please. Oliver sent a video of himself and studio animators gathered around a projector. My page splashed onto the wall, voices whooping after the final sentence. I laughed until tears blurred the screen, realizing the journal was bridging miles nothing else had managed. The reading circle. Encouraged, I proposed story night to Mason, the activity coordinator. He booked the lounge for Thursdays, advertised with hand-drawn posters, True Tales and Hot Cocoa, featuring our very own Mr. Thompson. The first session drew 8 residents and Lucas, Rosa's nephew. My voice shook for the opening paragraphs, but by the time Emma rescued her reckless cat, the room breathed as one body. Laughter sparked. Mrs. Patel dabbed her eyes. Lucas shouted, "Encore!" When the clock chimed 8, No one moved. A silence thick with communal belonging. We agreed to meet weekly. Story night swelled. 22 attendees, then 30 caregivers, lingering in doorways. Residents volunteered their own memories. June read about a secret wartime romance. Daly recited field letters never delivered. I compiled their accounts between my journal pages, ink mingling in a patchwork of voices. The book had become a living organism, fed by collective heartbeats. A conversation with Emma. One sleepless evening, after the corridors fell silent, I opened the journal to a blank spread and wrote directly to Emma for the first time since her death. Dear love, today, Oliver's Dragon short won a festival award. You would have clapped until your palms stung. Clara's poem is shortlisted for the Forward Prize. She claims she stole the title from your garden notes. Michael's compass tattoo points to the cottage coordinates. He texted the photo at 3:17 a.m. Also, I'm learning elastic band Pilates. Imagine Daly's face when I outstretched him. I still miss your marigolds, but I'm tending Maplewood's row with half your devotion, twice your clumsiness. Thank you for teaching me that ordinary days are treasures pre-polished for memories. Mantle. The words bled across both pages until they blurred. When I finally capped the pen, grief felt lighter. Not because it diminished, but because it had been witnessed. The Lost Pages Scare. One windy Friday, the journal disappeared. I searched my room, the lounge, the garden. Panic gnawed. How do you replicate a second heartbeat? Before I could notify staff, Lucas burst in brandishing the book. I borrowed it to draw the kitten scene, he confessed, contrite. Relief collided with exasperation. Yet seeing his charcoal sketch of Emma, victorious, on her ladder dissolved every reprimand. We glued his drawing onto the opposite page with June's wool as a border, baptizing the journal as part scrapbook, part time machine. The promise. Winter edged closer, nights lengthened, pages turned thick with ink, the journal's spine swelled. One afternoon, Rosa laid a second blank volume beside the first, forest green leather, gold-stamped, to be continued. She shrugged. Thought you'd need it by New Year's. I touched the fresh cover, realizing she was right. The life I once deemed finished had sprouted sequel after sequel. I drafted a promise in the final lines of Volume 1. When this book closes, another opens. Stories are rivers. Banks may change, but water finds a way forward. Sending the gift forward. On On Christmas Eve, with snow brushing Maplewood's windows like a careful house painter, I wrapped the completed journal in brown craft paper and tied it using June's green yarn. The label read, "For the Thompson Family Archive, handle with wonder." After midnight service in the lounge, silent nights sung off-key but heartfelt, Rosa drove the package to the overnight courier. It would reach Michael's lab on Boxing Day, then circulate to Clara's flat, Oliver's studio, perhaps one day to a grandchild's bedtime shelf. The thought warmed me more than mulled cider, yet I kept the photocopies for story night, for sleepless hours, for whatever chapters remain. Coda. Ink as lifeline. Now, each evening before the light's low chime, I rest my hand on the second journal's unopened cover. I feel the thrum of unwritten sentences gathering like birds on a wire. Somewhere beyond the courtyard, my children pivot around their own fulcrums of ambition and doubt. Here inside Maplewood, I listen for the bell that dictates tomorrow's breakfast, grateful that between those regimented rings, ink allows me to ramble anywhere. Apple blossom dawns, meteor-showered deserts, marigold-scented kitchens, even back up that silly church ladder to rescue Emma rescuing a tabby who never learned about gravity. The journal was meant as a pastime. It has become a bridge between decades, between continents, between the living and the remembered. And every time the tip of my pen kisses paper, I'm reminded that while bodies settle into routines, stories remain wonderfully insubordinate. They roam, they multiply, they refuse to be silenced. As long as I have words left to spend, I will keep flinging them outward like bright coins, sure that someone, some morning, will stoop to pick one up and feel a little richer for the finding. Chapter 7. An Unexpected Visitor. The afternoon began as most afternoons did at Maplewood residence. Sunlight slanted through the hallway skylight. Somewhere down the corridor, June's crochet needles clicked in patient staccato, and the faint rattle of a medicine cart echoed like distant sleigh bells. I was in the workshop sanding the edge of a cedar bird feeder, coaxing it smooth enough for a wren's fragile feet, when a child's laugh, clear, high, entirely out of season in this land of shuffling slippers, burst through the open door. Looked up. Standing on the threshold was a boy no more than 8, reed thin, knees scuffed, hair the exact color of cinnamon toast. His t-shirt bore a cartoon rocket mid-launch. A backpack, half unzipped, drooped from one shoulder. For an instant he seemed carved from sunlight, all bright edges and kinetic possibility, as if the day itself had decided to wander in and take human form. "Hi," he said, lifting a hand in the smallest wave. "Are you Mr. Thompson?" I wiped a ribbon of sawdust from my glasses. "That depends," I replied, adopting the mock stern tone I'd perfected on my own children. "Are you here to repossess overdue library books?" His grin widened, revealing the gap of a recently lost front tooth. "No, sir. I'm Lucas. My Aunt Rosa works here. She's doing rounds, so she told me to sit in the lounge, but I heard a hammer and—" His eyes darted to the bird feeder. "Can I watch?" I checked the wall clock. 20 minutes until the bell for afternoon tea. Plenty of time for a detour. "Well, Lucas, workshop rules say observers must wear safety goggles. Do you think you can manage that?" He nodded vigorously, dropped the backpack with a soft thud, and accepted an oversized pair of goggles that dwarfed his freckles. Once he'd perched on the neighboring stool, feet swinging, I offered him a scrap of sandpaper. "Go with the grain," I instructed. "That means follow the lines in the wood." He set to work, tongue peeking from the corner of his mouth in fierce concentration. For several minutes the room held nothing but the synchronized hush-hush of sandpaper strokes. I stole a glance. He was tracing gentle ovals, exactly as if he were petting a nervous animal. "Why a bird feeder?" he asked finally. "Because birds don't argue about politics," I said. It was meant as a joke, but he considered it with disarming seriousness. "My mom says birds carry wishes," he offered. "If you feed them, they'll take your wish to the sky." I pocketed the line like a shiny coin. "And what would you wish for?" He shrugged, an eloquent lift of thin shoulders. Yet a flicker crossed his eyes that told me he did indeed have a wish, maybe more than one. Before I could prod, the corridor filled with Rosa's unmistakable humming. She appeared in the doorway, eyebrows arched in half surprise, half amusement. "I see you found trouble, Lucas." "Not trouble, Auntie, a project." She thanked me with an apologetic smile, but I waved it off. "We're almost finished. May he help with the last nails?" Rosa hesitated, professional caution colliding with a nephew's delight, then relented. Lucas held each brass brad steady. I tapped it home with the smallest hammer, letting him claim credit for every satisfying plunk. When we slid the roof piece into place, he exhaled a soft, "Wow," as though we'd built a cathedral. "What will you fill it with?" he asked. "Sunflower seeds, mostly. The cardinals here are partial to them. Can I bring some tomorrow?" He turned to Rosa, hope stretching his syllables. "If Mr. Thompson doesn't mind," she said. I did not mind at all. The seed day. True to his word, Lucas arrived the next afternoon clutching a plastic tub labeled Astronaut Trail Mix. Inside, I discovered a motley galaxy of sunflower hearts, pumpkin seeds, and dried cranberries. Left over from lunch, he explained, cheeks pink. The cranberries can be for you. Birds might think they're planets or something. We mounted the feeder on a shepherd's hook outside the sunroom window. Lucas unlatched the lid, scooped 2 generous handfuls of mix, and sprinkled them inside with ceremonial gravity. Then, he pressed his nose to the glass and waited. 5 minutes passed, an eternity in child time, before a chickadee swooped in, black cap flashing. Lucas gasped so loudly that the bird fluttered off, only to return seconds later with a friend. Soon the feeder resembled a commuter tram at rush hour, chickadees jostling for sunflower seats, a bold nuthatch edging in sidewise, one irritable blue jay shouting orders no one obeyed. Lucas narrated the spectacle like a seasoned sports commentator. And here comes Captain Stripe, pushing past. Ouch! Foul wing contact. Laughter bubbled from him, effervescent, contagious. Residents, drawn by the commotion, drifted over with walkers and wheelchairs until the sunroom felt 5 degrees warmer. Mrs. Patel offered Lucas a shortbread biscuit. June crouched to show him how her crochet looked like tiny bird footprints. Even Calvin paused his ceaseless baseball talk to identify the Blue Jays' batting average at seed theft. The boy took it all in, eyes flicking from face to face, absorbing, names the way thirsty roots absorb rain. Before Rosa collected him, Lucas placed both palms on the window glass, as if trying to memorize the curve of each feather. They like us, he whispered. They actually like us. I surprised myself by answering, yes, they do, and realizing I meant the birds and the residents both. Story Swap Saturdays. After the seed day, Lucas's visits became semi-official. Rosa's weekend shift meant the boy was Maplewood's honorary intern. Mason, the coordinator, printed him a badge, birdhouse consultant, which Lucas wore with solemn pride. One Saturday, he trotted into the lounge with a sketch pad and box of crayons. Mr. Thompson, can you tell me a story? I'll draw it. I had intended to spend the afternoon repairing a wobbly chess table, but the earnest tilt of his head disarmed me. We settled at the corner table. How about the time your grandma Emma baked a pie so enormous the mayor used it as a drum during the harvest parade? I offered. Real story? Well, real-ish. Shall we start? He nodded, crayons at the ready. I narrated, Emma mixing batter in the wash tub, Michael guarding the crust from sneaky neighborhood dogs, the pie pan borrowed from a steel foundry. Lucas's crayons danced, chocolate brown crust, ruby red apple centers, a stick figure mayor, wielding drumsticks. When I finished, he flipped the pad around. The drawing was gloriously chaotic, perspective wobbling, colors colliding, but the joy was unmistakable. "That one's going in the journal," I said, meaning it. Lucas beamed, gap-tooth sparkle magnified, secrets under the elm. Late in October, Maplewood's elm shed leaves like giant copper coins. Lucas and I raked them into waist-high piles. Between flurries of laughter, he confided his secret wish. "I want to be an astronaut artist, paint galaxies no satellite camera ever sees." An astronaut artist. The phrase ignited a constellation in my mind. Michael's aerospace dreams fused with Clara's poetry and Oliver's animation. "That's quite the ambition," I said. "You'll need courage for the rockets and imagination for the canvases." "Think I can do it?" "I think anyone who feeds birds with trail mix has the right qualifications." He grinned, then asked, "Did you always know what you wanted to be?" I hesitated. Carpentry had unfolded gradually. Planes, shavings, the smell of cedar, and fatherhood had ambushed me like a glorious storm. "Sometimes," I admitted, "life tells you what you're best at by handing you tools and watching what you build." Lucas mulled that over, then darted into the leaf pile with a whoop, leaves showering like bronze confetti. Echoes in the hallway. Lucas's presence lingered long after his departures. Residents spoke of him as if he were a fresh draft of air. Mr. Daly, once prone to scowls, taught Lucas a salute, hand to brow, elbow sharp, which the boy performed to each veteran he passed. June crocheted him a scarf the exact shade of spacesuit white. Mrs. Patel snuck him gulab jamun from her care package. Tin. Calvin promised box seat tickets to a baseball game, once you're tall enough to see over the rail. Lucas reciprocated with handmade tokens. A pencil sketch of June's cat, a card listing Patel's spice jars in rainbow order, a paper airplane fleet for Daly. He treated Maplewood not as an institution, but a village, each resident a potential story. The Midnight Emergency. One crisp November evening, the fire alarm shrieked at 12:37 a.m. A toaster in the staff kitchen had rebelled. Protocol swept us into the parking lot, residents bundled in quilts and confusion. Amid blinking red truck lights and the strobe of emergency lanterns, I spotted Lucas, also evacuated, pajama-clad, hand clamped in rosas. His eyes were wide, yet steady. He detached and wove through clusters of residents until he reached Mrs. Patel, whose asthma rasped in the night air. Unbidden, he offered his inhaler. "I left the cap on, it's clean." Rosa nodded approval. Patel accepted gratefully. That small act, performed under sirens, cemented Lucas as something more than a visitor. He had become Maplewood's honorary grandchild, ours collectively. A gift returned. Near Christmas, Rosa wheeled a parcel into my room. It was wrapped in newspaper comics, a jagged ribbon of red yarn, June's handiwork, tied around. "Lucas insisted you open it now," she said. Inside, a new sketchbook, cover painted midnight blue with silver speckles, tiny galaxies swirling. On the first page, Lucas had drawn the bird feeder scene. Me at the window, birds mid-flutter, residents clustered behind, himself front and center wearing safety goggles too large. Beneath, in uneven block letters, "Thank you for teaching me that seeds and stories both help things fly." For the second time that year, blank pages no longer scared me. I pressed a hand to the cool cover, blinked harder than I intended, and whispered, "He's returned the journal gift." The larger orbit. As winter deepened, Lucas's visits naturally lessened. School resumed, soccer tryouts, the gravity of routines, yet the trajectory was set. Each appearance felt like a comet swing, brief, bright, recharging our resident cosmos. On days he couldn't come, Rosa delivered notes. One featured a crayon planet labeled Maple World, inhabited by smiling stick seniors waving walkers like flags. "You are the only grown-ups who know how to play," his accompanying message read. I pinned these missives beside my children's letters, a constellation of correspondence reminding me that family expands not by blood alone, but by the orbits we share. Closing scenes. The last chapter of every Lucas visit ended the same. At the foyer doors, backpack zipped, goggles tucked inside. He'd perform daily salute, accept Patel's cookie, fist bump Calvin, hug June with care for fragile bones, and finally turn to me. "Keep the feeder full, okay?" "Always," I'd say. Then he'd be gone, sneakers slapping across the threshold like a bird launching into open air, carrying our collective wishes skyward, exactly as his mother once told him. And in the hush that followed, Maplewood inhaled the echo of his laughter, an oxygen richer than any pharmaceutical blend, a reminder that even in a residence designed for the sunset of life, dawn could arrive riding on the shoulders of an 8-year-old astronaut artist who, Believed seeds and stories shared the same equation for flight. Chapter 8. Letters to the Faraway. I used to believe distance was a fixed thing, measurable in miles, calibrated by airline timetables. Then Emma died, the children scattered, and Maplewood wrapped itself around my days like a snug but silent overcoat. Only after the journal awakened my pen did I realize that distance is elastic. It shrinks under the pressure of ink, and it stretches whenever silence lengthens. So I declared war on silence. I started a campaign of letters. The letter. Desk. Every Sunday evening, once the corridor dimmed and the last bingo chip clacked into its tray, I converted my desk into a tiny post office. Left-hand pile. Linen finish stationery the color of pale tea. Center, 3 fountain pens, 1 blue, 1 emerald, 1 burgundy, because each child deserves a signature hue. Right-hand dish, petals. Of dried marigold, folded tissue thin, a trace of Emma's garden. In the top drawer I kept inclusions, souvenirs slim enough to travel, a cedar shaving that still smelled of my workshop, a photocopied recipe for Emma's molasses cookies, Lucas's crayon comet, June's crocheted bookmark, Daly's miniature field map of camp positions rendered in biro. I told myself these objects were postcards in another dialect, tactile proofs that life here kept turning. Monday, Michael, Pacific Time. Michael's letters go out first because rocket scientists work insane hours and deserve fresh news at dawn. Begin with the mechanics he loves. Dear Mike's son, today Rosa let me replace a broken caster on her supply cart. Required only a 7mm socket, but I still felt like a launch pad tech. Enclosed, you'll find a pencil sketch of the bird feeder's load-bearing bracket. Never know when aerospace might need avian-level engineering. I update him on the courtyard. Stargazers. Your sunflower seed nebula is attracting red giants, alias plump cardinals. Then I slide in the cedar shaving and a marigold petal. On the envelope flap, I stamp a compass rose that points, always, to home. Tuesday. Clara, Greenwich Mean Time. For Clara, I choose the emerald ink. It behaves like whispered sea glass on the page. My dearest word weaver, the library nook smells of dust and plot twists. June reorganized crime novels by number of victims. Calvin complained his alibi was misfiled. I read them your poem about thunder sneaking under doors. 13 residents applauded, 1 snored, but in a lyrical rhythm. I tuck in a line from an unpublished Emma recipe. Courage is a pinch of nutmeg, knowing Clara will steal it for dialogue. A pressed daffodil, Maplewood's lawn variety, not Wordsworth's, finishes the package. On the back, I doodle a quill sprouting wings. Wednesday, Oliver, Indochina time. Oliver gets the burgundy pen, flamboyant as his animated dragons. Hey there, color mage, tested your shading tip on my birdhouse signs. Now the chickadees look 3D and demand royalties. Enclosed, a flash drive of resident sound effects for your next project. Daly's Cannon Sneeze is a masterpiece. Please add Lucas to the credits as junior noise director. I slip inside a wooden coin I carved, one side a smiling dragon, the other a marigold. It clinks gently, proof that real life still makes analog noise. Night mail to Emma. Once the 3 outbound envelopes sit like obedient ships in a row, I turn a fresh page in the journal and write a 4th letter. Never. Sealed, never sent. My Emma, Michael says the Mars lander will carry a micro-library chip. I pictured your face on Mars, scolding that dusty red soil for lacking compost. Clara stitched your cookie recipe into a poem. Read aloud, it tastes like cinnamon thunder. Oliver's animating a phoenix who forgets she can fly. He swears it's not autobiographical, but I know better. I watered your marigolds twice. They refuse to give up. When I finish, the silence in the room sounds less like absence and more like a held breath. The waiting game. Mail leaves Maplewood at 9 a.m. on Rosa's off-white trolley, past the smoking gazebo and the hydrangeas that still believe it's June. Then waiting begins, a span measured in resident gossip, therapy bands, and cups of weak tea. Michael's reply usually arrives first, an email at 03:00 my time. Running. Field tests. Saw your bracket sketch, engineers laughed, asked for patent. Love. M. Clara responds next with an airmail envelope scented faintly of London fog. Her cursive glides. Dad. The daffodil survived customs. Elise framed it. Enclosed poem owes you royalties. Oliver tops them all with digital fanfare. A video message, introduced by Trombone Sting, his dragon coin spinning end over end before morphing into Maplewood's logo. He mouths, "Yes, Dad, I'm sleeping. Sort of." I print every email, press every poem flat, replay each video until Rosa threatens to confiscate my tablet for battery abuse. Then I pin the correspondence on the corkboard, my private constellation of confirmations that love still loops the globe. A letter goes missing. Inevitably, something slips. One chilly February Tuesday, The Clara packet boomeranged back, scarlet, undeliverable, stamped across the marigold. I pictured my letter wandering Heathrow's conveyor belts like a tourist, denied boarding. For 3 days, regret gnawed. On the 4th, a Maplewood volunteer wheeled in an elderly man for respite care. Mr. Wickham, retired mail sorter. When he saw the red stamp, he chuckled. Wrong quadrant code. Happens when clerks daydream. He guided me through the arcane hieroglyphics of postal routing, then personally hand-sorted the envelope into a diplomatic pouch, leaving on a military flight. Clara's thank you postcard arrived 2 weeks later, embossed with gold ink. Saved. By a guardian angel in khaki, Dad. I delivered the note to Wickham. He saluted like Daly. Distance shrank by another centimeter. Counter letters. The children began sending their own inclusions. Michael shipped a sliver of carbon fiber panel from his first satellite, lighter than a sigh. Clara mailed a chapbook titled Marigold Syntax dedicated to the man who taught me commas are bird perches. Oliver posted a Vietnamese lantern that folds flat. When I open it, tiny paper dragons revolve like clock gears. These treasures ignite the resident community. June uses the carbon fiber as a shuttle in her loom work. Daly claims the lantern is clearly a coded map. Calvin insists the chapbook's release party needs popcorn. Maplewood becomes a postal museum curated by collective wonder. Cascading effects. Story night evolves into letter night. Residents dictate missives to estranged. Nieces, wartime buddies, forgotten high school crushes. I supply stationery and wax seals. Lucas licks stamps like an over-eager collie. Mason erects a world map on the lounge wall. Every outgoing envelope earns a red thread. Every incoming reply a blue. By spring, the map resembles a loom. Grief and hope weaving longitude into cohesion. A proposal in the post. One morning, my mailbox holds a thick tube from London. Inside, a rolled manuscript. Cover page reads, Home Orbits, a novel by Clara Thompson. Chapter 15 is The Bird Feeder Constellation, starring Mr. L. for Lucas, and an ensemble of defiantly alive retirees. A sticky note. Need accuracy. Vet. Edit freely, Dad. I spend a week marking margins, adding carpenter slang and Rosa's shoe size. I include a new marigold petal, slightly brighter, spring's first bloom. Clara replies, manuscript sold. Dedication page upgraded. To Dad, who proves stories are migratory birds. That same week, Oliver's studio greenlights a short film, Seeds to the Sky. Guess the title credit? Inspired by the Thompson letters. And Michael, never outdone. Forward schematics for a CubeSat he's nicknamed Emma 1. Payload, a micro laser that projects haiku onto low-orbit dust clouds. He asks if we'll supply the haiku. Daily volunteers his battle hymn. June counters with crochet terminology. We compromise on Clara's 5-syllable tribute. Marigolds ignite. Gravity forgets to hold. Home blossoms in flight. The letter to my future grandchildren. In early summer, I write the most difficult letter of all, addressed to any child who inherits my laugh. I recount Emma's ladder rescue, the day Michael's rocket soda bottled the ceiling, Clara's first pirate story, Oliver's cardboard puppet revolt. I explain why marigolds mean courage and why bird feeders mean faith in return flights. I seal the envelope with green yarn, slip it into volume 2 of the journal, and label the spine Open in 2050. Let the ink travel farther than my voice ever will. Epilogue in blue ink. Last night, under a June coral pink sunset, the mail van delivered a slender parcel. Inside, a fountain pen with a barrel of lapis lazuli resin, a shared gift from all 3 children. The inscription on the clip reads, Distance, Cut Ink X Wonder. I take it as endorsement to keep the war on silence raging. Tomorrow is Sunday. The desk will transform again. 3 envelopes will launch, plus 1 nightly whisper to Emma, plus all the echoes the residents consign to my fountain pen artillery, because I finally understand. Letters are not paper boats on a careless river. They are bridges suspended in midair, planked plank by word, strong enough for memories to cross, wide enough for hope to pass in the opposite direction, waving like a traveler who knows, deep in bone and marrow, that every faraway place is only a detour on the way back home. Chapter 9. A Son's Return. The summer morning dawned unremarkably. Dull pewter sky, a hint of humidity pressing against Maplewood's brick walls. Yet from the instant I swung my legs over the mattress, I sensed the day crackling with half-heard music. I performed my standard inventory: knees, tolerable; wrists, mutinous; heart, impatient, and drifted to the window. The courtyard hydrangeas sagged beneath last night's storm, but one stubborn sparrow hopped along the path as if auditioning for optimism. At breakfast, Mrs. Patel accused the omelet of missing turmeric. Mr. Daly refolded his napkin with military precision. June tested a new crocheted tea cozy on the community pot. Nothing outward hinted at revelation, and yet my pulse drummed like knuckles on a locked door. It had been 3 weeks since Michael's last email. Big milestone coming. Wish me luck. Will call soon. I knew his lab was preparing a satellite vibration test. I told myself that must be the source of this nervous static. But as Rosa cleared plates, she paused behind my chair and said, sotto voce, Mr. Thompson, front desk has a visitor on the sign-in sheet. Won't say who just yet. She winked and vanished. The workshop could not distract me. I mismeasured dovetail joints, sanded the same corner of a birdhouse until cedar curls littered the floor like confetti. At 11, I gave up, washed my hands, and drifted toward the lobby, pretending I needed postage stamps. The receptionist looked up with a conspiratorial smile. Guest expected around noon, sir? Might want to keep the afternoon free. Noon. The dining hall clock crawled, one arthritic tick per eternity. Rosa brought soup. I tasted only steam. Conversation eddied around me. Calvin's baseball statistics, June's yarn sale triumph, but their words slipped off my thoughts like rain off waxed canvas. At 12:42, my napkin fell to the floor. As I stooped to retrieve it, a commotion sparked in the corridor. Rubber soles squeaking, a child's high giggle, and, threaded through the clamor, a voice I had not heard in person for 5 years. Dad? I straightened too quickly. The room tilted. There he was in the dining hall doorway. Michael, taller, perhaps leaner, hair dusted with desert lab blonde streaks, eyes the same earnest hazel that once begged me for telescope parts. Beside him stood a girl of about 7, clutching a plush astronaut, and a smaller boy, maybe 5, clinging to his father's cargo pants while peering out with shy excitement. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Sounds muffled, as if the building inhaled with me. My chair scraped back. My legs, wary but obedient, carried me forward. Suddenly, Michael's arms were around me, strong yet trembling. The scent of jet-lagged clothes and California sagebrush filled my lungs. Foreign notes overlaying a melody I would recognize blindfolded. Dad, he repeated, voice cracking on the single syllable. We made it. The little girl lifted the plush doll. Grandpa, this is Commander Starshine, she announced with grave importance, then stepped closer to hug my waist. The boy followed suit, his small fingers gripping mine like an anchor. My breath left in a rush I hadn't realized. I was holding. Residents erupted. Mrs. Patel applauding, Daly saluting, June wiping tears behind her tea cozy. Calvin called, "Better save me some of that reunion dessert, Mike." Laughter rippled. Someone rang the lunchtime bell early, as if the institution itself wanted to celebrate. Finding a corner of quiet. Rosa escorted us to the sunroom. She'd placed a vase of freshly cut marigolds on the table, Emma's quiet signature, then slipped away, leaving us in a hush punctuated only by the birds at Lucas's feeder. Michael exhaled. The lab approved my leave last minute. We caught the red eye. Figured if we hesitated, inertia would win again. I studied his face. The fine lines of responsibility, a faded coffee burn on his wrist, the tired glow of someone who spends nights chasing star data. Yet beneath all that, the boy who once dismantled my wristwatch still flickered. "You look like you've been wrestling gravity," I murmured. He chuckled. "Every day. But you taught me that persistence is just gravity." Upside down, introductions ensued. The girl was Sophie Emma Thompson. Mom says middle names keep memories alive. The boy, Liam Arthur Thompson, after two stubborn men, Michael said. They offered hand-drawn pictures. Sophie's depicted Maplewood orbiting the moon, small windows glowing. Liam's showed a cardinal wearing a spacesuit. I slid both into my journal, each a comet trail across blank pages. Stories across sandwiches. We lunched in the courtyard under an umbrella that trembled in the breeze. Michael unfolded news. The Emma 1 CubeSat would launch next spring. Clara's haiku would ride aboard. Sophie could already name 6 constellations. Liam preferred inventing his own. That one's the dragon pancake. Michael's nights were swallowed by code reviews, but he still played trumpet lullabies for his kids over dinner. I shared my own mosaic. Lucas's astronaut artist ambition, June's scarves, Daly's secret peppermint stash, the carousel of resident letters traveling the world. Sophie asked if marigolds really chased away loneliness. I glanced at the petals trembling in a jar and answered, "So far they haven't failed us." After sandwiches, Liam spotted the bird feeder. Within minutes, both children were kneeling by the window with June and Lucas, who had materialized as if summoned by Kid Radar, comparing seed preferences versus orbital velocities. I leaned back, sun on my eyelids, heart oddly weightless. The hesitant confession. Later, Michael and I strolled the perimeter path, gravel crunching underfoot. He apologized for the years that stretched between visits, PhD deadlines, a mortgage, sleepless babies, the myth that tomorrow is infinite. I listened, remembering my own youthful hubris, the way chores and ambitions colonize every calendar square. When he fell silent, I said, "Time's job is to keep moving. Ours is to decide what rides with it." He stopped, hand on the courtyard fence. Dad, do you regret letting me go so far? Regret? I pondered. Regret is just love that never got its answer. Look around. I gestured to the garden, the feeder, the marigolds. Answers keep arriving, sometimes late, but always in the right uniform. Michael's eyes shone. I've felt her. Mom, guiding the satellite team. We built a plaque with her name inside. Didn't want distance to steal her story. I squeezed his shoulder, unable to speak. Ripple. Effects. Word of the visit ricocheted through Maplewood. Daly insisted on giving Sophie a miniature medal. Mrs. Patel taught Liam how to roll chapati dough. Calvin lined up plastic chairs for an impromptu grandstand, calling the Cardinal show a double-header. Residents who rarely ventured outside joined us, drawn by children's laughter the way wildflowers lean toward sun. Michael watched the interactions, amazement softening his features. I thought retirement homes were all bingo and bleakness, he admitted. We have bingo, I conceded, but bleakness can't compete with crochet espionage and planetary bird feeders. He laughed, full-bodied and unguarded, the same sound that once rattled our cottage rafters. Evening benediction. By dusk, the children drooped. Flights and excitement weighed their eyelids. Rosa arranged a spare family suite for the Thompsons. Maplewood owned a surprising stash of child-sized pajamas. Before bedtime, Sophie and Liam placed fresh seed in the feeder for tomorrow's crew, then hugged every resident in reach. Daly saluted back. June whispered a poem. Patel pressed sweet pastries into tiny hands. Michael and I lingered in the hallway outside their room. Lights dimmed to a twilight glow. The air smelled faintly of lavender detergent. I'll be here all week, he said almost shyly. Maybe longer. The lab can wait. Stay as long as you've got breath, I answered. Dad. He hesitated. There's talk of relocating, remote work, closer to family. We're exploring options. I felt my heart perform a small somersault. Frontiers come in many sizes, I said. Some fit nicely inside a state line. He smiled, eyes reflecting the corridor's soft luminescence. Guess we'll test that orbit. A quiet triumph. Near midnight, unable to sleep, I padded to the sunroom. The moon pinned silver coins on the floor. Outside, the bird feeder swayed. A cardinal, restless, night angler, landed for one last seed. The sight tightened my throat. I remembered whispering at this very window, "Come home, son." Now behind me, breathing slow and steady in borrowed beds, that plea had become fact. I opened the journal, fountain pen poised, and wrote, "Tonight the distance collapsed." The air between breaths shrank until it could fit inside a marigold petal. A son returned. 2 grandchildren mapped the stars from a retirement courtyard. And in the silence after they slept, the world felt smaller than hope and bigger than fear, exactly the size of Emma's outstretched arms. I capped the pen, slid back the curtain, and let moonlight wash the ink until it gleamed. Somewhere down the hall, Michael murmured in his dreams, rocket equations or childhood lullabies impossible to know. What mattered was the vibration in the walls, the hum of a family's orbit realigning. Outside, the cardinal launched into the night, a red spark stitched against velvet dark. I watched until it vanished, then whispered to the hush around me, "Welcome home, my boy. Let tomorrow rise whenever it's ready." Chapter 10. Reunions and New Beginnings. The week following Michael's return unspooled like silk, bright, tensile, full of hidden strength. And by Friday, Maplewood was thrumming with rumors of still larger miracles. One rumor whistled in on the evening breeze and landed directly in my ear. Clara, my word weaver, had booked a seat on the red-eye out of Heathrow. Another, delivered in a crackling overseas call, announced that Oliver and his animation crew were between deadlines and suddenly flush with time and frequent flyer miles to burn. I believed neither rumor fully until the front desk phoned my suite at dawn. "Mr. Thompson, you'd better hustle," the receptionist giggled. "Arrivals." "Incoming!" Thirst landing lights for Clara. At 9 a.m., the automatic doors sighed open and Clara strode through, coat flapping, laptop bag thumping, green eyes shining with jet-lagged defiance. She wore the same tweed cap that had appeared in 100 of Faraway. Her author photographs, but her smile, when it met mine, was pure childhood. Dad, Clara Bear. No further syllables were necessary. We collided in an embrace that flattened the pages of her manuscript packet between us. I felt her ribs, fragile but steady, beneath my palms. She smelled of rain clouds and London Underground. Coffee. Behind her loomed a slender woman with an undercut and silver nose ring. Elise, the poet I had met only through postcards. She offered a handshake and a shy greeting before producing a tin of shortbread stamped Fortnum and Mason. "For your tea club," she said, as though gifting the crown jewels. Michael barreled down the corridor with Sophie and Liam at his heels, and the cousins met like meteor showers, brilliant, messy, unstoppable. Within minutes, they were sprawled in the sunroom, swapping celestial facts versus dragon lore, while Mr. Daly, self-appointed head of intergenerational security, tried valiantly to maintain order. Oliver's skyscape entrance. That afternoon, the quiet whir of wheels outside announced a rideshare van from the airport. Oliver emerged wearing sunglasses shaped like pixel hearts, one suitcase sprouting anime stickers, and a grin that could jumpstart a dormant star. Two colleagues trailed him, lugging camera gear. How? A Vietnamese sound designer with a laugh like temple bells, and Priya, an Indian storyboard artist whose arms were tapestries of inked galaxies. Oliver bowed theatrically to the courtyard audience, residents, lined along the veranda railings, and declared, "Permission to film the most legendary family reunion in the Northern Hemisphere." Mason, Maplewood's activities director, nearly fainted with glee. "Long as I get a cameo," he said, already drafting release forms. The Great Picnic Summit. Clara suggested we hold an outdoor editorial meeting. Michael rebranded it Mission Debrief. Oliver insisted on sun-drenched storyboarding. Whatever. The label, Saturday, blossomed into Maplewood's first multifamily picnic. Setting the stage, June contributed crocheted tablecloths in marigold orange. Mrs. Patel marinated chicken with exactly 8 spices. Daly fixed bunting between elm trunks with military knots. Calvin cued a playlist that ricocheted from Sinatra to BTS Lucas, arrived in a self-decorated junior media liaison badge. We spread blankets across the lawn. Liam practiced cartwheels while Sophie attempted to catalog every cloud above us. Oliver's crew set up tripods to capture the chaotic splendor. Elders swaying to mismatched rhythms, children chasing wind-blown napkins, and Clara perched on a picnic cooler scribbling metaphors faster than ants could hijack the sugar bowl. At noon, a gust tipped the bottle of lemonade. Liquid sunlight cascaded, threatening the angle of Oliver's camera lens. Michael leapt. Clara lunged. I swung my cane like a croquet mallet, and together we averted catastrophe. Laughter exploded, sharp, resonant, communal. I heard Emma in that laughter. An evening of firsts. First public reading. Clara unveiled Chapter 15 of Home Orbits. Residents and staff formed a semicircle. Fireflies winked approval in the dusky air. When she reached the dedication, "To every home that dares to keep its porch light on," I could not breathe. Sophie slipped her hand into mine. First live. Score. Michael unpacked a battered trumpet. Liam a toddler-sized shaker egg, Hao a bamboo flute. Together they improvised a lullaby Clara once hummed as a child. The melody rose like mist above the hydrangeas. First projection premiere. After dark, Oliver's team beamed rough cuts of seeds to the sky onto Maplewood's stucco wall. Animation dragons unfurled their wings across bricks, while actual moths flitted through the projector cone. The youngest audience members howled. The oldest dabbed eyes. When the credits rolled, inspired by the Thompson letters, edited on location, Maplewood Residence, Summer 20XX. The cheering rattled a few perfectly respectable dentures. Family council at the bird feeder. Next. Morning, I found all 3 children waiting at the bird feeder bench. Their faces were simultaneously determined and anxious, a tribunal of grown-up toddlers about to pitch an audacious plan. Marina blue jays dive-bombed seeds behind them as if eavesdropping. Clara spoke first. Dad, we've been talking, really talking, for the first time in years. We don't want this momentum to fade once flights take off. Michael slid a folded diagram into my palm. A rotation calendar color-coded by city. Between remote work, residencies, and film festivals, he explained, one of us can spend at least a week here every quarter, Oliver added, and we'll keep cross-posting vlogs so you won't have to squint at emails. Maplewood Wi-Fi can handle 4K, right? I studied the grid. Teal blocks for San Diego, emerald for London, plum for Hanoi, blank spaces brimming with potential. An entire orbit system engineered so their lives would intersect mine on predictable vectors. I don't require guardians, I teased. We know, Clara answered, but stories need witnesses, and we want front row seats. I felt something shift, a tectonic plate tilting beneath years of resignation. This was not charity, this was fellowship renewed. Lucas's launch day. Tuesday dawned hot and bright. Lucas arrived carrying a shoebox rocket he'd built with Michael. Cardboard fins, glitter glue, and a nose cone stuffed with scribbled wishes from every resident. At precisely 10 a.m., we gathered on the baseball diamond behind Maplewood. Rosa counted down. Lucas pressed the ignition button on a toy air pump launcher. The rocket shot 30 feet, arced, and nosedived into Mrs. Patel's herb patch. But the payload, safely wrapped in foil, burst free, scattering paper wishes like confetti. The children shrieked. Calvin declared it a season-high score. Daly saluted the trajectory. I stood with Clara and Oliver, paper petals raining, and realized we had just reenacted Emma's philosophy. Launch something full of hope. Celebrate. The crash. Plant the next seed. Goodbyes. Rewritten. Departures came, as departures must, yet none tasted like the old leave-takings. Michael's family left first, only for 3 weeks per the new schedule, but Sophie insisted on gifting me Commander Starshine as interim guardian. Clara and Elise departed the following dawn, promising the paperback release party would stream live onto Maplewood's lobby projector. Oliver lingered 2 more days to finish bonus footage, then hugged me so hard my ribs squeaked. Rosa found me afterward in the workshop, oiling the rocker Emma once favored. "Empty nest again?" she asked. "Not empty," I corrected, smoothing a stubborn knot in the wood, just widening between heartbeats. The next morning's bell. Routine resumed. 8 a.m., oatmeal, 10 a.m. meds, 11:15 Pilates. Yet everything felt rewired. June distributed souvenir postcards. Mrs. Patel launched a weekly spice-tasting club. Mason scheduled a documentary shoot about creativity in late life, hosted by Howe and Priya. Even Daly volunteered to teach Lucas semaphore. I sat at my desk and opened the lapis lazuli pen. Volume 3 of the journal lay fresh and waiting. I wrote, Emma. All vectors realigned. Children in orbit. Grandchildren broadcasting static of pure joy. Rocket fragments fertilizing herb gardens. Proof that goodbyes are simply commas, never periods. Beginning a new paragraph now. Hold a place for me on the porch. Marigold sowed, feeder full, compass steady. With love that keeps rewriting itself. Arthur, I sealed the entry with a pressed petal from Mrs. Patel's rogue patch. Evidence that even crash landings can blossom. Coda. Porchlight Mathematics. That evening, just before the lights low, chime, I wheeled my rocker out to Maplewood's veranda. The sky burnt coral. Cicadas tuned their violins. In the distance, the maintenance cat, Oscar, regarded me with imperial indifference. I thought about distances again, how miles, like loneliness, shrink when divided by wonder. I counted my blessings the old carpenter's way. 10 fingers, then start again. Michael's trumpet note, Clara's paper daffodil, Oliver's dragon coin, Lucas's whoop at liftoff, Commander Starshine smiling from the windowsill. One porch light flicked on, automatic timer. Another clicked a beat later. Soon every veranda bulb glowed, gold beads on a rosary. I rocked gently, cane resting across my knees, and performed the final arithmetic of the day. 1 life, 3 children returned, 2 grandchildren discovered, 1 retirement home reborn. Infinite beginnings, the equation balanced. The porch light held. The story I knew would keep drafting itself long after the last. Bell faded. Great work today. Every moment you spend practicing brings you closer to mastering your English listening and speaking skills. Remember, progress comes with patience and consistency. If this story inspired you or helped you in your learning journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Easy English Spark channel for more lessons and stories. Keep listening, keep speaking, and keep believing in your growth. I'll see you in the next video. Take care and keep shining.